I'd like to turn now to Teresa Gerade. Teresa is an advisory member of a Vermont Canadian volunteer organization in the Northeast Kingdom known as DUMP. Don't undermine Memphremagog's purity. Hope I said that right. We came into being in June of 2018 to appeal the application of a 51-acre expansion of Vermont's only permitted private-owned landfill in Coventry. The goal of the group is to restore and protect the waters and the watershed of Lake Memphremagog, an international lake located in the northeast corner of Vermont. The appeal was unsuccessful due to a lack of funding for legal representation. However, the group did participate in a mediation session with the owners of the landfill and achieved a 4-year moratorium on the discharge of landfill leachate, that is the garbage juice that is created in landfills, into the lake watershed. DUMP is now actively pursuing a state legislative designation of a, quote, lake in crisis, end quote, to garner funding and additional support in their efforts to restore and protect the waters of the lake. And I hope I didn't butcher that lake's name too much, Teresa, and I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Great, thank you. It's actually Memphremagog. What I want to talk about today is landfills. They are a major source of PFAS contamination, but they are often overlooked. So you heard about the DUMP group. I do want to mention that the lake is not only a recreational resource for Vermonters, there's a lot of fishing, there's international swimming contests, but it is also a drinking water reservoir for 175 Canadian citizens. So just a little background about how PFAS can get into the water from a landfill. The landfill is basically the big hole in the ground, and we put all kinds of waste in it. A lot of that waste contains PFAS. You have furniture, the Scotch guarding, water repellent, the nonstick fry pans, all of that. And as the rain falls, it generates a liquid called leachate. And this leachate is collected at the bottom of the landfill. It has a lot of PFAS in it, a high concentration, and it goes to a wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant is designed to remove organic waste, but it is not capable of removing the PFAS. So the water mixes with the wastewater, the leachate is in there, and it all gets processed, and the effluent goes into the river with its PFAS chemicals intact. A byproduct of the wastewater treatment plant is sludge, which also has a high concentration of PFAS. That sludge goes back to the landfill, or it is sometimes used as biosolids, and it's placed on agricultural fields. When the fields are rained on, again, you have leaching of PFAS into the soil, into the water. The plants can uptake PFAS as they're growing. The livestock eat the crops, we eat the crops, and now you have contamination of humans with PFAS, as well as their drinking water. The landfill also has emissions, vapors in the air, much like what Laureen was talking about. Travel through the air, they land on people's yards, it rains on their yards, and then you have contamination in the yards. Here is the Lake Memphremagog. It is an international lake. As you can see, most of it is up in Canada. The water flows north. The landfill is located very close to the lake. It's like a mile from the landfill to the South Bay. It's in the middle of a watershed of Lake Memphremagog. There are rivers that border the landfill. There are wetlands that are adjacent. Also, there's a wastewater treatment plant, which is also right near a river which is really on the shores of Lake Memphremagog. So there is plenty of routes of contamination from the landfill. And as I said, it's all going up into Canada to where the drinking source is for the Canadians. So what are the sources of PFAS in the landfill? We have bulky items like couches, mattresses, textiles, and carpets. There was a test done by the state of Vermont on these various sources. These were the 3 highest concentration sources. As you can see, it's hundreds of thousands of parts per trillion, with outliers over 2 million parts per trillion. So again, the landfill leachate treatment is inadequate. Test sampling the PFAS in the leachate was 25,111 parts per trillion in 2018, collected at the landfill, goes to the wastewater treatment plant and into the river with its PFAS. So from 2010 to 2019, over 100 million gallons of PFAS-laden leachate was generated. And in our own town, 36 million gallons passed through the Newport wastewater treatment plant and flowed into Lake Memphremagog. The residual sludge also has a high concentration. That was tested with values as high as 215,000 parts per trillion. Some of the sludge is applied as biosolids, as we mentioned, to contaminate crops, livestock, and groundwater. The remaining sludge goes back into the landfill to increase the concentration of PFAS in the leachate stew. Our one Vermont landfill received over 80,000 tons of sludge in the past 2 years. Over 50% of it came from out of state. The international commerce laws do not allow us to prohibit the for-profit landfill company from accepting sludge from other states. So we know there is contamination in the lake. There was a study done by the U.S. Geological Survey. It was published in 2019, and they found that through the years of 2014 and 2017, 30% of the brown bullhead collected in Lake Memphremagog were identified as having malignant melanomas. And I just like to read what they said in the study. Malignant melanoma in freshwater fishes has been reported before, but this cancer occurrence cluster is raising questions about the cause of the tumors and the implications for the long-term health of fish populations. Also, earlier just this year, the Canadian officials found PFAS in the source for the drinking water for the city of Sherbrooke. And as I mentioned, the source of their water is Lake Memphremagog. So we wonder, has our food chain been poisoned? Is it safe to eat the fish that are caught in Lake Memphremagog? Why do some have lesions? Fishermen tell us there are bass that also have these lesions. The crops that are grown in fields where the biosolids are applied, is it safe to consume those crops? Which fields have those biosolids? We don't know. We don't know if it's safe. The fish have not been tested for PFAS. The crops have not been tested for PFAS. There was a farm in Maine recently that had to dump all of their milk because it had PFAS contamination. PFAS vapors are emitted from the landfill. So we wonder about the people that are downwind. Do they have PFAS in their water, in their yards? We're trying to inform people of the dangers and to stop PFAS from going into our lake. So what PFAS is generated by the landfill? The EPA in 2020 said that over 2,600 active landfills, the average size is 600 acres. Our Vermont landfill is about a quarter of that size, and still it generated 14 million gallons of leachate in 2019, and it received 44,000 tons of sludge in 2019. So what can we do to protect the public? I think we need to establish some accepted guidelines for screening PFAS levels like we have for other things in our blood, cholesterol and glucose. Get a baseline, as Laureen has suggested, and then from year to year in your annual screening, you'll know if your PFAS levels are going up, where's the root for that? What's the cause? And you can take the appropriate action. We need to test the fish and the livestock for PFAS concentrations and discontinue the application of biosolids that contain PFAS. We need to require that all operating landfills and wastewater treatment facilities remove PFAS before they discharge any water or sludge in the environment. And we need to develop disposal options for PFAS-laden items so they do not end up in a landfill. We can all learn the sources of PFAS and boycott any purchases and reduce, reuse, repurpose, and recycle. Thank you very much for the time to present this information, and thank you to the Academy for the study. I'm hopeful that it will benefit all.
Thank you very much, Teresa. If you'll stop sharing your screen. Thank you for telling us the story of Memphramehog Lake and the watershed and how it's impacted the citizens on both sides of the Canadian border.